Today's universities encounter the difficult problem of an explosion in knowledge and information. Not only has this been a problem on the side of universities, which have become increasingly more democratized and decentralized in their teaching approach, but with technology, for all the good that it has done for us, professors must often find creative ways to pass on the knowledge of Western civilization to students from very different backgrounds and life experiences. The vast successes of the modern sciences and technology, chief among which is the internet, have also contributed greatly to the richness and knowledge about our universe and the physical world, as well as to the copiousness of knowledge virtually accessible to us from anywhere. Visionaries have always anticipated that there would one day exist a worldwide information network. Nikola Tesla toyed with the idea of a world wireless system in the early 20th century. He proposed and designed a telecommunications and electrical power delivery system based on his theories of the Earth's atmosphere as electrical conductors. Later thinkers like Paul Otlet and Vannevar Bush conceived of mechanized, searchable storage systems of books in the 1930s and 40s. It wasn't until the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, or ARPANET, a network originally funded by the U.S. Department of Defense, adopted the Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol, or TCP/IP for short, that had been developed by Robert Kahn and Vincent Cerf in the 1970s as a way of standardizing how data could be transmitted between multiple networks. The online world became more publicly accessible and saw exponential growth in the 90s when computer scientist Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. Ever since then, the public has had growing access to an overwhelming amount of information, which has both greatly benefited the universities, but has also made it more difficult for us to make sense of it all, to distinguish between what is important from what is not. With that said, there has always been a need for us to unify knowledge in ways that are useful and meaningful to us, and that would create stable, consistent worldviews, or systems of values ranked in order of fixed importance. Having that kind of outlook on life would keep us from leading lives of blind decision-making. It would keep us focused on leading lives that are ordered towards attaining the best things in life, so that each of our decisions will bring us closer to our ultimate purpose, if there is one, of course. Whether there exists just one or many ultimate ends which are the same for all of us, or which are simply relative to each person, to his or her own preferences, are questions that need to be explored. A worldview would have an answer to these questions and would help us to make decisions that are based in reality. We need to seek historical context for such a task and recognize that it is influenced by the cultural milieu in which we live. Our task calls for a contextualized approach to interdisciplinary unity. There is also a second kind of division in our lives: pluralism and cultural diversity. These two states of life are not bad in and of themselves, of course. Without pluralism, we would not have access to the many different viewpoints and ideas that others have to offer us. Without cultural diversity, we would not be able to appreciate the different ways in which people adapt to norms and life circumstances. That being said, however, these kinds of diversity have given us fewer presuppositions that we now hold in common, which have made it difficult for us to engage in effective dialogue. Such an understanding is especially needed for universities and colleges that depend on ease of communication for ideas to be effectively critiqued and developed. Thanks again to technology, people from all over the world can communicate with one another. Students from Europe, the Americas, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East learn from and with each other. Without proper contextualization, however, ethnocentric tendencies often arise. In order for students and people to engage in genuine dialogue with one another, there must be careful understanding of each other's cultural background. One must understand the context from which the other person communicates and lives out his or her worldview. This would allow us to recognize any biased attitudes and communicate on more common ground. It would also help us appreciate each other's long-lasting cultures and perhaps assimilate elements into one's own mannerisms in dialogue. Such an approach would make finding interdisciplinary unity more effective. It would also help unify the many disciplines and fields of human knowledge. Knowledge unification also requires that justice and peace are relatively secured. Violence and warfare keep cultures and nations from enjoying the relative leisure and peace necessary for them to dedicate their energies towards learning and acquiring genuine wisdom. This is a problem for some countries more than others, like those who live in war-torn nations in the Middle East, and for those who must live under the rule of Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Poverty in places such as Africa and South America also prevents people from attaining the requisite material conditions to acquire knowledge. Those who live in a country where these unfortunate conditions are not present, and have had the opportunity to pursue a good education, are extraordinarily fortunate. The mission and goal of Treading Wisdom is to unify. It's to demonstrate how unity can be achieved among all disciplines and fields of knowledge, as well as among all cultures and worldviews, by showing that there exists a science dedicated to relating all aspects of a reality to one another, and to the highest causes and principles of everything around us, a science known throughout history as the study of metaphysics. Metaphysics was founded and systematized by Aristotle, a 4th century BC Greek philosopher, but was practiced by others before him. Plato, his teacher, wrote Socratic dialogues containing metaphysical topics, such as those found in the Republic and Phaedo. The pre-Socratic or Ionian philosophers greatly influenced Plato's thought on the matter, such as Heraclitus and Parmenides, both of whom lived in the 6th to 5th century BC. What we know of these authors, we, for the most part, know through what Plato and Aristotle have written of them. Only fragments remain of their writings. Metaphysics has always had a long-standing controversy, due in part to its obscure subject matter, and to, in my opinion, gross misunderstandings of later philosophers who have inadequately promulgated the study. Some have simply misunderstood what the writings on the topic were meant to achieve. In my next video, I will discuss how different cultures have approached the search for human wisdom, and then I will introduce the study of metaphysics and provide a topology of the ways in which metaphysics has been taught in Western culture. I will also then focus on why I believe Aristotle's approach to metaphysics was the most focused and most sound of all the major philosophers who have taught the subject. Afterwards, I will outline how the properties of the subject matter relate to all of reality and how they relate to the ultimate causes of its subject matter.